Versus Left. Host Rob B. attempts to look at both sides of every political issue, as well as draw on the historic precedent and influences in modern politics, as well as the future being built by the leaders of our time. Like, subscribe, and sit back as we dive in at Off the Rails Right versus Left.
All right, welcome revelers. Let's get this off the screen here so you guys can actually see me. We're back on what's been pretty much a non-stop daily barrage going into the election. Trying to get out here and talk to some of the candidates in the races, like some of the local races and the house races, state house races and state senate races, some of the judgeships. Basically trying to find candidates that don't really get an opportunity to publicly speak and make their ideas known to the public. And yet you as the voter are supposed to be informed when you go in and come across that entire ballot. So, and in this particular race, we're looking at the Texas House of Representatives, District 87. There's a couple of the big party candidates, but we also have an independent write-in candidate. And so this is like really important for you to know that they're there because it has to be written in correctly. They're supposed to follow the intent of the voter, but we know how those things go. So we are happy to have join us today Jeff McGunegle. McGunegle? Did I get that right?
Yeah, or McGunegle, either one.
McGunegle? Perfect. Yeah. So
yeah, man.
All right. Well, thank you for making and I appreciate you making the time for me. I mean, we're a little show. We don't get a huge live viewership, but we end up getting thousands of people coming back afterwards, catching the clips and then following up from there. So definitely nice to have you join us. And when people are reviewing their ballots, if they're like, oh, who's this guy, I'd like them to be able to Google your name and be able to find an interview where they can see what you're actually where you stand on the issues.
Absolutely gets me out there. I think I got a lot of great ideas, transformative ideas that and really I feel like I've been shunned in a sense. It's kind of like the local Amarillo Tribune, I contacted them, said, hey, you didn't list me in your voter guide. They come back, oh, we checked with the Secretary of State and you are and I'm like, aren't you supposed to know that?
Well, I mean, I found your information and the information of all the candidates for all the races in the very publicly available state listings. So there's not really any reason to not have it on there. You're also listed on Ballotpedia, so I don't know why they wouldn't have it on there.
I'm very much in depth on that, and and they just took snippets. But then again, I'm a controversial person, candidate, and my what I have to say perks up the ears of those that do not get represented in this. So it's best to keep me as quiet as possible, I would say. So.
Well, see, I disagree because I mean that's actually the problem in our system is it was never intended to be a two-party system, and yet we've been deadlocked into it. And of course, those two parties control all the houses, so no matter where you are, they're trying to keep everybody else out.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then like it's kind of interesting because I actually say both of the parties are shifting too far left for me as a libertarian because the Republicans are becoming more centrist, despite the hype about them. They're actually becoming more centrist. And at the same time, the Democrats seem to keep going further and further left because, these days it seems like they haven't heard of a government control that they wouldn't
Yeah.
like to implement.
Well,
So
maybe they're just getting pushed over there. You know, I mean, that's kind of this pendulum, this polarity. You start pushing one way, it's got to kind of move that way. So,
well, I think kind of what's happening is so a lot of disinfected Democrats are moving over to the Republican Party. And in the Republican Party, when somebody says something wackadoodle, they just go sit down and shut up.
yeah.
But when somebody in the Democrat Party says something wackadoodle, they say, hey, let's go this way, because they're the loudest voices. And so they think that's like the path of the people, and they don't. So I think the Democratic Party is kind of in the process of abandoning the principles that were supposed to represent them.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not they ever follow those principles, I think there can be a debate on, because outside of like a few figures like JFK, I don't think they did follow the true liberal values.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm weird. I would have voted for JFK. I would have voted for Ronald Reagan the first time, but not the second time, because he spent too much and started messing with gun rights. So yeah, so I'm kind of like both ways. You know what I mean? Retroactive knowing everything, I would have voted for the icon of the Democrat Party, and I would have voted for the icon of the Republican Party. And the first time I voted, I actually voted for a Democrat for president. So
Yeah.
Al Gore.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the first election I was old enough to vote, and that's who I voted for, was Al Gore, because yeah, I've known cokeheads, and I heard all the stories about George Bush, and I didn't want a cokehead in the office.
Oh, yeah.
So we're not going to say anything about a certain candidate's interview the other day where she's sitting there going,
yeah,
all through the interview, like she's got. I mean,
Yeah.
we've all seen that behavior, and we know who it comes from. So that was kind of
right,
weird.
right.
So you are an independent and then a write-in candidate. So explain what the voters have to do if they want to cast a vote for you.
What do they have to do? That's the thing. I've looked at, I look at the ballot. If this is what you're asking me, if I look at the ballot and it's got this spot write-in,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if there's going to be a list of who those write-ins are.
So there's not. So
it's got to be.
It's important for the voters, because if they collect write-in, they will be able to type in the name, but it has to be really close to your name, because they have to see clear intention. Your name's unique enough, even if they misspell it, I think they can't get it wrong. But elections are important, so
Yeah.
it's pretty easy to remember. McGunegle without the A.
Right. There you go.
Jeff McGunegle.
Yeah.
And so if you want to vote for him after our conversation, like, he's not in my district, I didn't vote for him. Like, I've had to in a couple of these interviews, because I voted already. I had to make the disclaimer that I'd already voted for the person I was interviewing, because the interview didn't happen until after I voted.
Yeah.
But in this case, you're not even my district, so I don't get a vote for you.
I don't.
So
you'll find out a little more about that.
Yeah. So now what is your experience that's leading you into politics? Because you look like you've got a day or two on me. So
yeah. Actually, I was a longtime school teacher, special ed teacher. That's a long story, back in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically came to Amarillo to reinvent myself. I'm also a life consciousness coach.
Okay.
And it led me into politics.
Mm-hmm.
And never any interest, really in local politics. But I ran for mayor in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to see how pretty much just how people, I can say, aren't really qualified for it, but more importantly, how one person here in the city, determined by one speech, one quick who do you want to be on the city council and mayor, and he said blah 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 blah. Those 5 people became the city council and mayor.
Right.
And this is Alex Fairley, and he also became this hero of the city. And that's when I first came in. He was like a hero of the city, because he sued the city for the civic center deal, tax deal. But
Mm.
I always looked at it as fishy. I always looked at it as fishy, and he became this hero, and all of a sudden becomes a spokesman of who ought to be in the politicians running, or actually in. So they all won.
Right.
But I also saw a lot of dirty stuff going on and paying off and so forth, and people that didn't qualify and they were able to win, um, and I'm like, okay, what's my next step? I wasn't sure, because this is like a calling of justice, or truth. I'm a
Yeah,
truth teller.
and I feel the same way. Like, full disclosure, I plan to run in 2026 for
Oh,
US House.
awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we're coming about. We've
Yeah.
had enough. We've had enough.
Well, and that's why, I'm actually a libertarian. I am registered Republican, but I'm a libertarian.
Uh-huh.
And the reason I'm registered Republican is the Libertarian Party doesn't have a primary; they have a convention,
Okay.
and I can't attend a convention when you can never get a hold of the state or national party.
Uh-huh.
So I want my voice to be heard in the primaries, and since the Republican Party, at least, I think everything starts with how you handle the money, and they're closer to my ideology for fiscal conservancy. Not that they actually behave that way, but at least their platform is that way.
Mm-hmm.
They both always increase the budgets, and they both always try and tell you how to live your life. They just have different ideas of how you should live your life.
Right.
But neither of those go towards securing the prospects of liberty that the Constitution set out for us.
It's it's to me the plutocracy, and to me it's
Yeah, nowadays, like, looking at some of the stuff, it's darn near a kleptocracy. So
yeah. We've actually taken humanity out of most everything.
exactly, and
And
then we
replaced with the dollars.
we reduce everybody with statistics, and then everything they want to do, they forget the fact that they have to steal from people that worked hard to get their money in order to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people say, "Oh, taxes aren't theft." If I don't hand it over, people with guns are going to come get me. That's theft.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, yeah, to me, it's rough.
Yeah. So on the street, man, though, you start talking to people, there's a lot of apathy and there's a lot of hopelessness right now. And it's not going anywhere. And I'm talking to people last night. People are scared to death about either Harris or Trump winning.
Yeah.
They're scared to death.
I don't. So there's a lot of things I don't like about Trump. I think he's a disgusting human being.
Yeah.
But, like, flawed people do great things all the time. You know what I mean? George Washington was a slave owner, but was part of the process to set up the greatest country that's ever been.
Yeah.
Flawed people do great things. But
we're so degraded now.
Yeah. That being said, Donald Trump was in office for 4 years, and nothing that bad happened. The worst thing that happened was January 6th, which had lasted about 3-4 hours compared to 6 months of the BLM Summer of Love. Like, I get it, but I think, burning down 57 federal buildings is worse than the majority of those people walking peacefully through the Capitol. Yeah. That's not saying everybody. There were people that committed crimes, and they should go to jail for the crimes that they committed. But the people that were waved through the doors by the police and just walked through are also being prosecuted as though they were attacking police. And it's just ridiculous when you have people in the Summer of Love actually attacking police and our current vice president bailing them out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's bizarre to me.
No truth, no trust, man.
Yeah, exactly. And then the reason Kamala terrifies me is because her whole career she's talked socialist talking points, and she came from a state where they've damn near implemented total socialism. Like, the real tax rate over there is just ridiculous once you add all the sources of taxation, to where people are only keeping 30% of their income, so they're only 30% of the way from being totally socialist.
Mm-hmm.
And they probably just can't get away from that because people will start waking up. Well, I don't know. They got to 70%. I don't know how they haven't woke up yet. You know what I mean? So it's bizarre to me. Anyway, but here in Texas, and specifically in your district, I know one of the big things going on in the state house right now is the whole, like, thing with education, which is huge for our future. And a couple stats that strike me were like, what, 36 for funding in the country, 43rd
Yeah.
for performance, and we're like third worst in the country for literacy rate.
Yeah.
So that's disturbing. So
And I'm a school teacher,
yeah.
come from a very highly intellectual family, and I understand that.
So
The core of our quality of life is in education.
yeah, and so I mean, part of that, I think, funding is one part. I say it's only one part, and this is the part that I get every time I talk to somebody that's a teacher. They try and push back,
Uh-huh.
and that there's bad teachers you can't get rid of, and to pretend that there's not is intellectually dishonest, because there's bad people in every job that need to
Mhm.
go away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they tend to be even worse if they're unionized. And I know not all teachers have to be in the union in Texas, but the ones that are have this big old corporation, which is what it is. It's not a conglomeration of teachers anymore. It's a corporation directing what the teachers need to do.
Mhm.
So now you've got them having the backs of bad teachers, because if that teacher gets fired, they don't get their dues anymore.
Yeah.
And if too many teachers get fired, then they might realize they don't actually need the union. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me. But I mean, funding does need to be addressed, and I think our teaching methods need to be addressed a little bit too. As we've been sinking, it's because all the countries ahead of us. Well, I give the national rank. If Texas was a country, we'd be the seventh largest country by GDP, but we'd rank like 100 in education.
Yeah.
So that's not a good place to be for a state with such a huge economy.
Right.
So what kind of
thing.
priorities would you take to the legislature to fix that?
I don't know if it's for one thing, it needs to be funded. For one thing, right now the vouchers, let's just put that away. We're trying to fix something that is absolutely broken. We've been saying this year after year, and when are we going to say, okay, it is absolutely broken? And so, we're with AI and so forth. We don't know what the world's going to look like in 3 years. You start college today, you don't know if your degree is going to be any good in 4 years.
I'd argue 90% of them aren't any good anyways.
Yes,
I've got a degree in accounting. It works, but it's useless because you can do most of it with computers now and not have to even think about it.
Exactly. Well,
you take a picture. You take a picture of your receipt, and the program does everything else.
Yeah.
The second part, for my MBA in marketing and administration, none of my teachers ever did marketing or administration. They had no idea how the real world works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I have three degrees that are mostly useless now.
Yeah.
Good thing I retired at 37, and I had found myself in a field that those things made me stronger at what I was doing, but they weren't dependent on my degrees, because the degrees are arguably useless. Yeah, go ahead.
As a special education teacher, who actually I work with kids with autism, which is they're the toughest kids in the world to actually reach. So
that's my new full-time job. I take care of my stepson to be here. We're getting married on December 14th.
Right. Well, yeah,
he's 33 and autistic, and he'll never be able to take care of himself.
Right, and that's how I've got a 29-year-old son like that. And actually, but I also spend a lot of time in the regular ed classroom, and knowing my understanding with the regular ed kids. Having a special ed degree, in my understanding, I can actually see a bigger picture than the regular ed teacher can. And one third of the kids have ADD now. And the instruction to me, especially in North Carolina, was very good. The curriculum. I mean, these kids had a lot more than I had in 7th grade. I'll tell you that. But I'm telling you what. We're dealing with kids now that have weak brains. They have weak brains. They have weak spines. So I worked for a company called Brain Balance, and we learned that actually by balancing the brain, exercising the brain, and so forth, we could actually control behavior. More concentration, intellect, everything. That has to happen. This has to be a brain-based learning system.
Mhm.
It PE, in fact, PE, everything you do as you sit there, your fingers move, you're exercising your brain. All PE, it actually can strengthen your brain, but we don't look at it that way. A balanced brain is a person with a balanced brain like myself is an extraordinary person, because I can see stuff on at such a vast different places. This is where we're failing. Actually, this is where we can rise above.
Mhm.
Plus, the kids today, they're entrepreneurial. They're not the kids that can sit in rows like a bunch of farmers patiently receiving nutrition. They don't work that way anymore.
Mhm.
They're much more individual, and they're bored. There's no meaning in the instruction for them.
Yeah. And so I actually think, like, I understand the challenge with the vouchers,
Uh-huh.
but at the same time, you've got to kind of understand why parents would not like paying property taxes that are supposed to pay for the education of their kids, and it's going to a public school that's not teaching their kids. So, I mean,
What the public school doesn't do, it doesn't empower kids.
they
It
tell them
doesn't
what to.
empower
They tell
kids.
them not what to, not how to think. They tell them what to think, and so
Yeah,
by the time you get past fifth grade, if you don't have any critical thinking skills, you're going to fail in every subject.
right.
And then we
So it's an
pass them
empowerment
anyways
thing,
because if you fail the kid, then it makes your school grades
right?
look bad.
And teachers teach, especially here. You can see this. I can see it in the whole city, because the city is a reflection of your school system, and I can see
Mhm.
disempowered people year after year after year after year that are it's like they're waiting to be told what to do.
Yeah. So
And when
part of that I think is like our desire of us as a society to like find something that's incurable to blame for a problem.
Yeah,
Okay. When I was a kid, nobody
yes,
had ADHD. And I'd argue that they don't now, because you can't tell me the same kid that can't sit through an hour-long class has ADHD when he can sit and play a video game for 16 hours straight on the weekend.
but it depends on if they have an interest.
No, that's the
Yeah,
point.
yeah, okay, yeah, okay,
They're being bored to shit. They're not
right,
ADHD. School sucks.
right.
So, and how are the countries that are performing better than the United States, and by even greater margins, Texas doing it? It's because once you get to third, fourth, fifth grade and your aptitudes and interests start showing themselves, they shuttle you into career path programs. And we're starting to get a lot of that in Texas with some of the charter schools and stuff like that that are attached to the public schools.
Yeah,
And I think maybe accelerating that might be a way to keep the money in the public school. But I think every parent realizes that public school isn't working.
no,
Part of that onus is on the parents because parents are uninvolved. But at the same time, the most successful countries, I think it's Denmark, Norway, their kids go to school for 5 hours a day and never have homework, and yet they come out of high school at
yeah,
16 and excel in college even here. So it tells me that the process, like the standardization of the teaching method and the one size fits all approach, is what's failing. And I think that's what's pushing parents to want to take their kids out of public school and go to private programs, because when you go to a private school, that's a lot of what they're talking about, is they're able to tailor to the interests of the kids so the kids are successful. Does that make sense?
yeah,
So now also there's some dirty pool going on here in Texas where they have a huge budget reserve that was left over, that for the money from the rich school districts were supposed to go to the poor school districts, and instead they have that money sitting in a fund that was never dispersed. So then the legislature needs to write some laws that holds the executive branch accountable for not following the law and dispersing that money.
yeah. I mean, it's a power over system that, I
Yeah.
mean,
Well,
is so
and
dominant.
and it's a problem. It's a problem on the national level too.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
write the laws that the executive branch is supposed to follow, but we don't put in the consequences if they don't. And then and you see that in like the criminal justice system as well. This is the law, this is the punishment, and then the prosecutor never prosecutes the crime, or they do even worse. The people have a right to a speedy trial, and they can't make a case, so they drag it out for a year, and a person who's innocent of a crime sits in jail for a year waiting trial because they don't
Yeah.
have money to get out.
Right.
But getting rid of bail doesn't work either, because then you're setting free people that are actually
That
criminals caught in the act on video,
and they can't function
and they can't.
out there.
Yeah, and then they never show up. Then they never show up, and you don't see them again until you arrest them for the next crime. That's usually worse than the last one.
And most of those people have ADD or learning disabilities too.
Yeah, well, I mean, I make the argument for learning disabilities. Like I said, I don't buy ADD because I've seen too many people that were. Oh, we lost him. Hopefully, he can pop back in here. So I have a hard time buying the ADD because it's you have the issue of the kids with ADD being able to focus on different issues. Yet the subjects in school they're not able to pay attention to, or they just generally don't. They're bored and lackadaisical in life, and that's why getting them onto paths that they're interested in and they can develop is a lot more important. So hopefully he's going to be able to join back in here. I lost you. Well, if there's anybody on there that wants to chat, I see we've got a bunch of people watching. If you guys want to chat, you can go ahead and throw out, what do you guys think? How's public schooling going in your communities? Because here it's inarguably a rough go of it here. So I'm not really sure what's going on here. It looked like we had a good signal, but I lost them. Well, at least we do know that he's passionate about education, because that's his platform here. Goodness. Okay, well, I guess I'm going to talk, and hopefully when he comes back, we can continue on where we're at. Yeah, this is rough, and I don't have a commercial I can dump to or anything like that. So, all right, I'm going to put you guys on hold here for just a second and communicate with him, see if we can get him back. All right, yay, looks like we got him back.
That's the weirdest thing. My phone overheated.
Oh, I've actually had that happen before too. So, especially if you're charging and running. I lost your sound.
There we go.
All right, cool. So, all right, so no biggie. So he'll be a little shaky, but we're gonna keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously there's a funding issue with the schools in Texas. I do think we have to address teachers not performing. I've discussed with some Texas Board of Education candidates about that we need better monitoring for the teachers, and he brought up, well, what about privacy concerns? It's a public school with 30 people that aren't related. There's no privacy issue in a school. It's ridiculous to think there is. And even broadcasting it to something that's like secure, that only the parents can log into and see what their kids are doing. Like that would probably cure some child behavior, and it would also cure some teachers not really doing their best, because you and I both know there's teachers out there that like roll out a movie or something every single day so they don't have to teach. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's the rule, it's the exception, but but then when those kids get passed on to the next class, they start the next class a year behind.
Right.
You know what I mean? So and so that's my issue with that. And then maybe looking at different directions for how we can be more engaged, because again, I do think, like, I saw the way my kids were taught when they were in school, and I would have lost my mind. And I actually left the public school system and started taking all my classes in college at 14.
Mhm.
So yeah, it would have drove me crazy too. So I don't know if they're ADD or just bored out of their mind by a horrible curriculum.
I think it's a big. I mean, we're seeing now. I mean, adults up to 80 or whatever. When we're on these phones all the time and scrolling, we're actually losing the concentration ability.
Yeah, well, especially with apps like TikTok and Reels on all these places where you have like a 15-second attention span, and it reinforces that brain chemistry of going for that next dopamine hit. Yeah, kids shouldn't be on electronics at all.
They're telling me though, at high school kids, they're telling me, Jeff, we want to get out of this thing. They feel the addiction to it.
Yeah.
And they want out.
And to me, that's good parenting. It's just as problematic and addicting. I wish my stepdad had beat the shit out of me the first time I smoked a cigarette.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I did athletics. So whenever I had sports season going on, and then for the 3 or 4 years that I was running marathons, I didn't smoke. The rest of my life I've smoked.
Yeah.
And it just becomes kind of the thing I do when I'm doing something and I can't, I just do.
Yeah.
And but it's something that when I'm not competing, and I broke my ankle, so I can't run marathons anymore. It doesn't take the pounding anymore.
It did that on purpose.
Yeah, I think so. So anyway,
I look at very big picture things though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so our schools are failing, our healthcare is failing, our our governments are failing. What isn't failing right now?
Right.
Business is failing. All this is failing. We have a crisis of wellness.
Right.
We have this. I'm a big RFK fan for years.
Yeah, and you start at the earliest levels, and all of our counselors, the only mental health professionals a lot of these kids are ever going to see, are doing scheduling that the administrator should be taking care of.
Right. Yeah, and they're really not. I mean, when you
get what I'm saying. That's the only resource that the kids have.
Yes.
And we're piling them up with administrative work that we're paying administrators to do in ever increasing amounts of the budget. And that's the concern of most people in the school say, we need more money. And it's like every time the budget's increased, the score's gone down. So it's a hard push convincing parents that more money needs to go into this, especially when we're kind of ridiculously taxed in a state like Texas, that if they just set up a sovereign wealth fund off the oil like they did in Alaska, nobody would be paying taxes.
That's what we have to do. Something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
So then you have the money to play. But what is clear in the results coming around the world is getting kids broken off to their actual interests makes for a more illuminating learning experience, a more engaged student. And when the kids come home excited and happy and talking to their parents about how great school is, it gets the parents involved in the system too.
Absolutely. Yeah, the kids are inspired. There's
that's why you I understand you don't want to pull more resources from struggling schools, but that's why so many parents support the vouchers, is because when their kids go to private schools, that's the way the kids come home. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
My daughter was a great example. IQ 160. I was told she couldn't learn math. She started homeschooling, and every day she was excited about what she learned.
Mm-hmm.
Versus when she went to school, she was miserable every day.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I hope you will push the boundaries when you get there on education. But we got a lot of stuff that's going on in Texas, so I don't want to spend too long on education. There is one specific question I would like to ask you as far as school safety. And I preface it a very specific way. Do you oppose schools being as hardened as a state capitol building? Because nobody is getting into the state capitol unless they go through that front door. And yet the idea that we can't do that for our schools when our kids are arguably more important than a bunch of politicians is crazy to me.
Yeah. I don't know. I really thought about that. I'm one really that, wants to look at the roots of these things, man. Why? Well, the
roots are in mental health.
Right.
But if we don't correct the mental health in the meantime, we got to make sure the crazy people can't get to the kids.
but that's where I'm looking at my platform is a revolution of wellness and health.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if we don't have that, then we don't have the school systems that are worth a
Yeah,
shit.
well, which is exactly why I said like stuff needs to happen like at a
Yeah.
legislative level, that our counselors that are supposed to be there for the wellness of the students are not doing administrative work that should be done by the school administration that's getting paid to administer the school.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, in Charlotte, they did. I'd see at the end of the day, the principal and the 3 counselors would go do marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the highest of kids, the lowest of kids in that school. But they would go to the marketing. And I tell you what, though, the counselors weren't even that great. And the schools here, because of my background,
and again, then that becomes a quality of the staffing issue, and then the inability to get rid of anybody that works in the school system.
Yep.
So I mean, it's but you got to start attacking the problems, or it never gets better.
Yeah.
And you got to acknowledge all the problems. Now,
fortifying, I think we need to look at the fortification of pretty much everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the biggest thing is we need to start getting these people talking to people. Maybe not telling 40% of the population of the country that they're evil by virtue of the color of their skin.
Yeah,
is a good place to start.
Right.
And not telling another 30% of the 13% of the population that you're oppressed and you can't get anything done in life no matter what you do. Yeah. Like, that's the kind of stuff that wrecks kids' brains because they can't see the propaganda for what it is.
Right.
And then we don't give them the resources to deal with the mental health issues. And then we have the music stayed on again. And then we have issues like, I don't want to get into the whole LGBTQIA plus thing, but there is something markedly to be said that there was issues with people with gender dysphoria. We start acknowledging that the gender dysphoria, which is a body dysmorphia, like in the guide for psychology, that's where it was listed.
Mm-hmm.
So it was in the same category and anorexia and bulimia. And these kids could not be gender dysphoric. They might just be gay and uncomfortable because they're gay.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? And instead we're trying to change them to the opposite sex. And to me, that's kind of like treating a bulimic or an anorexic with diet pills.
Yeah.
And telling them, get to exercising, fatty.
Yep.
It's crazy to me. So
it is the whole we've lost, and that's the mental health thing. It actually, I think the WHO said that's our next pandemic.
Yeah, and I think all but one or two, and it relates to education and then going on into safety. It relates to that because of these school shootings. I think all but one or two of the most recent ones in the last 4 years, clearly just by looking at them, they had some sort of gender dysphoria. You know what I mean? But they never say it on the news because it doesn't meet their agenda that they want to broadcast on the news. But you can look at the pictures and you know when people are having issues.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that to me is an issue. So it's tough. Another thing that's challenging, and this is actually going to impact a lot more of the economy, but it's also impacting schools, and that's insurance. Because the insurance bonds and stuff that schools have to get are ridiculously expensive when they're getting such a small amount of money to begin with. And then the insurance is out of control because of liability, lawsuits, all of that stuff. And people are getting more and more litigious, but we don't really have any sort of caps on the amount of money that can go in. So the prices of the insurance keeps going up. And then you see that.
No clue about that.
Yeah. And then you see it in healthcare because the number one expense that all doctors have is the malpractice insurance. That's why all the doctors are closing down their private shops and going to work for a big company.
Yeah.
So they don't have to pay for the malpractice insurance anymore.
Right.
And then you got the same thing in the auto industry. It's not the average settlement that they make with the person who's insured that causes them the problem. It's the ridiculous lawsuits that they have to pay out on when they lose a lawsuit that drives up the cost. And so what you end up all the way across all three of the things that are getting the most ridiculously expensive And then with the car insurance, you're not supposed to drive your car if you can't have insurance, but they keep driving up the price of the insurance, which makes it almost impossible to have the insurance to drive the car so you can get to work, so you can afford the insurance.
Yeah.
So it's like a death spiral.
Well,
and then you get to the legislature where they would be the ones that would need to pass tort reform. And they're all a bunch of lawyers who, if they get voted out of office, are going to go back to practicing law. So they're not going to limit their future earnings.
Yeah. So I'd say we're kind of in a beyond gridlock.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous. And what I think we need is people coming in that aren't lawyers, pushing for first legislation that says you can't vote on bills that you have a conflict of interest. Once you get that passed, then you propose the tort reform, and anybody who's a lawyer can't vote on it because they have a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get all the people not lawyers saying, hey, lawyers, you got to stop being greedy. Too bad. We pass it. Little strategy if you get to the legislature.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've come across integral theory, but basically they've got what's called the meta crisis.
Mm-hmm.
We're in what's called the meta crisis, in that every segment of our lives is in crisis and change, and it's a big web. And you try to solve one thing over here, you're actually causing a problem over there. And right now we're stuck. In how to get out of it, who knows? But
I've had parts of my life where I felt that way, but now the only thing that I have left as far as debt is my car note. My property's paid off.
Yeah.
My property taxes are low because I'm out in an unincorporated county, and I took control of my life so I could live my life the way I want to.
Yeah.
But then again, we don't even teach kids the basics of finances and taxes and credit.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to a friend of mine about that earlier or yesterday. If it's consumer driven, make as much profit you can, sell your soul, whatever. Why teach people about credit? Why teach people how to handle their finances?
Yeah, because you want them to be irresponsible so they can spend more.
Absolutely, and that's what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm the same way. Yeah, I've narrowed my life down to a very little piece where I'm not stressed. I don't have to stress.
Yeah, well, until I met my fiance and came out to Crockett to help take care of her son.
Yeah.
Until that point, I was living in a tiny house in the middle of the woods, and my nearest neighbor was a 10-minute walk away.
Yeah,
and I liked it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. They got to come back in sometime.
Yeah,
right?
but I also had the utility companies bugging me every other month about hooking up to the grid because I was off grid. And I'm like, yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah.
So no, I'll produce my own power. Thank you.
They're gonna...
Oh, water? No. I've got the big tank over there. You see that? Yeah, I got it. I'm good. I'm paying more than you charge for water, but now I'm not beholden to you. So yeah, it's it is interesting. So and then the fact that as irresponsible as we've become as a society, the government's worse.
Yeah.
So yeah, so they're even more irresponsible. Yeah, and none of it's their money, and that's the biggest thing that concerns me. It's not their money. This irresponsibility is with money that does not belong to them.
Yeah. When I came in to run for mayor, my platform was creating the standard of excellence for the city government, for the mayor and the commissioners. A standard of excellence. Let's just have a standard of excellence, because what I found was an unspoken standard of mediocrity, where people were basically surviving and nobody's thriving because no one's empowered. Nobody would talk to me about it. They don't even know what excellence was.
Yeah, and you can't go into any government office anywhere and not see people that would get fired if they worked at your work.
Mm-hmm.
Except maybe if you work at a school.
Yeah.
In private enterprise, they would get fired.
But that was the thing, though. I was like, okay, so the way when I work with consciousness, the way it works, if you set a standard of excellence at the top, you're going to get a flow of excellence throughout.
Because and part of that is because of accountability, because you can't meet that standard of excellence with substandard people under you, and you're going to get rid of the substandard.
Exactly.
And that's where we have the problem.
Yep, it weeds itself.
Absolutely.
But they wouldn't take it for anything. It was like, there's the excellence guy, and I'm like, what? You guys are like,
Now,
but they don't know it. In that they're in, so it's stuck in the survivability where Amarillo is the potential of this place being an I-40 is tremendous. I call District 87 the handle.
mhm,
We we could actually create it where the handle actually controls the pan.
mhm,
If we took that place of like, okay, we're going to create this standard of excellence for the panhandle,
mhm.
and we're going to bring it to the state, it would shift everything. But right, Amarillo, basic or the panhandle has, for whatever reason, there's a lot of reasons that are to keep power, has remained pretty much anonymous.
Mhm.
Yeah, I saw this one guy was talking about the different areas of the state and what they represented. Like Houston was the toxic something or whatever, but he had good things to say too. But then he pointed over to the panhandle, and then he goes, "Then there's the panhandle," and he pointed, and then he turned around, like there wasn't anything there.
Yeah, which I understand we got agriculture and energy production up there, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you have I-40,
Yeah.
one of the busiest. I mean, and we're
Yeah,
known.
commercial transport routes.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
known as for a piece of meat, basically. Around the world, Amarillo is known for a piece of meat, which shows me the leadership for over 70 years did not create any kind of identity for this place.
Mhm.
A piece of meat, this 72-ounce steak. It's like, oh yeah, Jeff, that's that place that has that big cook. But we have that. That can be. It's kind of like I'm telling people, just see it. I'm a visionary. I see what can be. Um, but it's there right now. The power network that's been here for many, many, many years um, prefers to have this survivorship
Yeah.
thing.
And well, and most of the government funding to get to where we need to be as far as the excellence, I think would be pretty easy to do just by following the sovereign wealth fund plan
Absolutely.
that they used in Alaska. And then at the same time, at the state level, we need to get rid of any like development issues for companies building refineries. Because another big problem we have here in Texas is we can't refine any of the oil that we produce in West Texas
Mm-hmm.
because all that shale oil is a consistency that it can't go through our refineries.
Mm.
So we end up selling it internationally and buying the sweet crude from other places.
No, I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah,
What?
so our refineries work on light sweet crude, but West Texas has the intermediate consistency oil, and it's too thick to go through our refineries
Yeah.
efficiently. So there are refineries built for it, but we don't have any of them. But the regulatory burden at the federal and state level, and like the state legislature can streamline the state part of the process, and then that would give like I can't imagine Abbott not wanting more money coming into the state, but that would give him a cudgel to go sit down with Ted Cruz and say, "Look, you guys need to get these regulations fixed." You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or Colin Allred if he wins, who knows? I mean, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You got to position the state before you can bludgeon the federal government to free up your state and get their hands out of your pockets because the Constitution didn't give them a right to be in your pocket.
Well, you talk about this sovereign fund or whatever. What I'm proposing, and as a write-in, my chances of even coming, even getting a few votes is not that great. But actually, I did this for Carolyn Fairley's state of mind, basically, where her daddy has bought her, has sold her to Austin, but I'll get beyond that. I'm looking at Potter County. This city is divided into two counties, which is the craziest darn thing ever in a city of 200,000. And so but there's two representatives also. So I'm only to do for Potter County, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But Potter County's falling apart. And I'm like, okay, so we've got people that still have that money. They still have that money, which should have been in this fund. These people are still around. I need $1.2 billion to fix the infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take 10 years for the North Heights, which is the African American part of town, to fix their sewer and water pipes. 10 years at $1 million a year. They're 100 years old. I'm going like, let's start building these funds to fix, and let's fix it.
Yep.
And it's the baby boomers like myself, 60 and up. The money's there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the thing, if you're going to invest in these kids that are the sickest kids ever, let's do it. Start here, and get the city out of it, get the government out of it.
Yep. So, but like I do like going in as a state rep. If you get in there, now my path, I'm going right after Pete Sessions. I'm a libertarian, but I'm going to primary him as a Republican. That's what I've always been registered as, even though my ideals are more libertarian. Because the way I see it, the Republican Party isn't what they promise.
No,
they sit there and they pass the tax cuts that they promise, but then they guarantee that the next Democrat's going to raise taxes because they increase the debt so much they have to raise the taxes.
Yeah,
because they spent, and then we're starting to get the same thing in the Texas level. The Republicans just keep spending more and more and more, and I don't see a reversal. And we have more than enough government.
Yeah,
like the government doesn't need to get bigger.
Just like here, it's two sides of the same coin. We got two factions that are fighting with each other, and they're the same two control freaks that are the same side, or two sides of the same coin. It's the same thing with the uniparty.
Yeah,
as I see it too. It's all corrupt. It's corruption is corruption. That's
they're all one big corruption party, and it's time for somebody to knock them off their horse.
It's all corrupt. So how can you get anything that's really for the greater good out of corruption?
Yeah, and after Ross Perot scared the shit out of, what was it, Clinton and Bush?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, after that, they got even more corrupt and went and colluded and did the same things in all the states to make it even harder for independent and third-party candidates.
We better get super corrupt now.
Yeah. So it's like, oh shit, they're challenging our corruption. We need to shore it up with more corruption.
And that's where I got in this thing with Fairley's too. It's corrupt. It's a corrupted thing, and there's in this agenda that we don't want.
So and I'm funny. Like I've got this thing. Like obviously, I kind of think Trump's a disgusting person. He always has been. The guy's kind of a Percy sleazeball, but he reminds me of like 50% of guys that don't really mature properly.
Well, yeah, no,
because as teenagers, we all start out as perverts. Let's face it.
He's telling us about, Arnold Palmer the other night. I'm like,
but that's guys. It is.
But this is the
people want to be faux intellectual and pretend that's not how guys is. That is how guys are.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But now that being said, I think he's kind of a disgusting human being.
Yeah.
But the things that he did was involved in not trying to get the government to do stuff, but trying to get the government out of stuff to free the market and free the people. So I think he's actually closer to a libertarian than a Republican, which is why when he went and spoke to the Libertarian Party, he said, I'm really a libertarian, because he is. For a Republican, he's very, very centrist. Like he said flat out, he won't he won't sign an abortion ban because it belongs to the states, and the states can decide how they want to decide it. I'm not going to like some of them, but their local representatives can decide what they have. You know what I mean? That's getting government out of it. And then when you get to the state level, the state mingles its fingers into stuff that it shouldn't have any business in, all for the excuse of taking more money. And then, like, I find it ridiculous that the same people assessing your property values every year are getting paid from your tax funds to assess your property. So that's a conflict of interest.
It's all.
Yeah. So, and then it's more exacerbated by the fact that this is Texas. We pump more oil than Alaska. Like, I can't imagine any need if we do oil royalty contracts much better. Why we would ever need any funds from the citizenry. And then that's going to just push everything lower in prices. State level fuel taxes are an absolute joke, because what that is a tax 10 times on every item you buy at the store. So it doesn't make any sense to me because it has to be transported all over the place before it ever gets to your store.
No, yeah, it said, yeah, your tax, it's raised this, it's affecting this meta crisis.
Yeah.
I think if you go right now, in a top thing with me is water. You know, I know people actually. This is the identity of Amarillo is as an oasis. We could turn this into the technology turn this to a water oasis, which people would come from all around to see and be part of.
Well, and
But
you guys do get enough precipitation blowing through there. You can massively expand your reservoir system there and set up the foundation for growth that they don't have anywhere else.
All the technology is there. We could be actually a destination or a place you go through and say, wow, this place turned into a desert into water. They were out of water, a crisis, but then they turned this around. And but we have to get past this whole thing where, New Mexico, they will restrictions with farmers and so forth. Over in Texas, and it's like, we'll use as much as we want and, screw everybody else. There's that.
Well, but again, that comes into the reservoiring system because here in Texas, we got a whole lot of land.
A
whole lot. And we don't do a whole lot because we constantly get storms that come through. I know they get less in the eastern part of the state and up in the northern part of the state, but we do get a ton of water. And there's no reason why we can't do better job reservoiring that, because when you get over to Houston, all that's flooding and it's all rushing into the bay and out to the sea. And how much of that could we have captured to provide water to the rest of our state?
Reservoiring it, catching it. There's that. I mean, it's totally, and what you can do with water. I mean, they've got. I'm looking at. We have no natural jewels here, and we've got this beautiful park, but with water. But it's actually, I call it the sewer lagoon. But we could transform that into something like in Dubai. They have this what's called the Miracle Gardens. It's the most craziest thing you ever seen. They get less. I mean, they get hardly any water at all, and it's like millions of flowers and this and that. But it's this technology, and actually for us, it's getting out of this survivor, no vision, mindset.
Yeah, and there's and stuff like that. Okay, so the way I look at it, the majority of government projects don't really benefit everybody. But if you do a reservoir that's available to the entire state of Texas, you're benefiting everybody. And if you've reserved all that water, so you might have to pipe it over from West Texas to East Texas or to North Texas. Yes, this may be the case. However, once you do that, everybody in Texas is going to benefit by it because the farmers are going to be able to grow so much more. We're going to have more food here in Texas. It's going to be local, organic, better for you than the stuff coming from other countries that we don't know what they put on it.
Yeah, it's a whole industry.
Yeah,
it's a whole industry for getting away from the cows and all that. It's a whole thing, and it's a matter of taking that initiative.
Well, getting away from cows, that's like a bad idea if you don't understand the carbon cycle.
I know, man, but they're drinking all their water.
Well, okay, I understand that, but then we say we have a problem with carbon dioxide, but grass and shrubs are the fastest thing that pulls carbon out of the air, and then the cows eat it, poop it out, it absorbs into the ground, and the carbon's returned to the ground instead of hanging out in the air.
Yeah.
Like, they are our best carbon capture system, and they feed us, and it's the most nutrient dense thing that we can possibly eat.
Yeah, we can do better.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Well, but and again, you said they're drinking all of our water, but if we reserve water better, like how many trillions of gallons escaped the hurricane that came through here? Like, I know it was a tropical storm by the time this last one hit Texas, but we got dumped rain for like days. Yeah. And our rivers filled up, but there was no reservoiring to hold that water. So now all of our rivers are down at a low level again. All the lakes are at a low level.
Yeah.
You're telling me we couldn't figure out a way to capture that and, funnel that over to Canyon Lake? That's the lowest it's been in 50 years.
Yeah.
Is that really something you're trying to tell me? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And then we've got tons of dry lakes all over eastern Texas. If we just reservoired the water where we get rain and piped it that way, we could fill up all of those lakes that are dry.
Yep.
So, and then, wow, you know, a lot of that's going to evaporate. What's that going to mean? Oh, more consistent rain over the farmers? Oh, that would be rough.
Yep.
But I don't know. I go for solutions that make sense and help everybody. So instead of like things that I can throw pet projects to my buddies.
Yeah. True. True. Well, what I'm working on is taking this in bringing an identity. We're in a very interesting, great place in that really the city has no identity. It really has no identity. Some say it's like, the mayor will say it's a cowboy culture. It's not a cowboy culture. It isn't. Um, there's cowboys, yeah, but it's not a cowboy culture. We're multicultural.
Yeah,
And
I've been to Amarillo. Over half the cowboys I saw, I've never even sat on a horse. So
exactly. So I'm like, wow, I came here. What is our true identity? And it's as an oasis. That's what we are. It's always has been, always will be. All the cows go away, everything. It's still gonna be an oasis.
Yep. Well, and
So
the cows are there because it's an oasis.
right. So it can, and most people that come through here, they spend one night, and many I talk to say there's something I don't like about that place, and I know why, but we can change that. You know, it's a gold mine, but the thing is, this oasis, and really the biggest problem one of the biggest problems in the country is water. And so let's solve it here, or let's do our thing here, make
I'm
it the
with you.
industry.
So so what do you want your closing pitch to be, the last thing that people hear about you?
As far, for oh man, boy.
Oh, I've got it. If you want to push the boundaries of the norms and somebody who's going to push for dynamic change that the elite isn't willing to look at, Jeff McGunegle is your guy.
Absolutely.
So, and I'm gonna pop this up here. This is the candidate. If you're up there in the Texas House District 87 or 97?
87.
87.
Yeah.
Texas House District. It's a little bit cut off by the ticker, but Texas House District 87. Just look at how his name's spelled, so you can write it in after you click that right in box, and go ahead and write that in. And then down at the bottom, you can see our www.warmongershop.com. That is my merch store for my podcast and also my game streaming channel. I do them both. That's why it's called Warmonger Shop, because in the gaming world, I'm Rob the Warmonger, and all of the merch on there I designed myself. So if you guys want to support me, you can check that out. And again, we got the election coming up. Get out and vote as early as you can. Bank it. Don't wait until something goes wrong. And Jeffrey, I do appreciate you joining me. If you hang on for just a second after I earn it, I want to talk to you for a second, off the camera.
Yep.
And it was really great having you with us. It was an interesting conversation, and hopefully a lot of the voters in your district are able to take a look at you and consider the options, because I mean, the one thing that every voter can agree on is there's problems. Well, if all these problems were created under the Republican Democrat dichotomy, why would you keep voting for that?
Right.
So anyway, so thank you again for joining us.
Viva Amarillo.
All right. Well, all right. So everybody, my revelers, thank you again for joining us. I hope you guys found the interview interesting. I'll be putting up some clips later for some of the parts that I thought were the best. And I'm going to be continuing next week. I do have sub interviews scheduled. I'm going to try and get some more. I don't know how many I'm going to be able to get next week, because it's the last 10 days going into an election. So the people are going to be really busy. They're going to be poll watching during the day and going out and meeting voters before that, trying to make sure that everybody gets out to vote. So the most important thing, no matter what candidate you vote for, is go out and vote. Whether you want to vote for Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Socialist, Communist, Green Party, whatever you want to vote for, go and vote. because that is the fundamental right that we have and is the only control that we have over the politicians. And the guys that are screwing up, they don't necessarily have to lose in order to get the point. If they come close, you can still change the behavior. So thanks as always for joining us. We'll see you guys again on Monday. Of course, you can catch me over the weekend over on the streaming channel, on the gaming channel. And hopefully you guys are enjoying all these interviews that we're doing.